Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today I have some exciting news. I am going to be reviewing what might be a future feature of HEMA Ratings. If you don't know, HEMA Ratings is the website where they track tournament results, and it's generally one of the only places you can go to see a kind of weighted rating, similar to how you might have a rating in chess, for any individual fencer in a number of weapon categories. But something new is coming. Duels. Now, you might be thinking that duels are what we already do at HEMA tournaments, but this is going to be a little bit different in that it's going to be modeled after judicial duels and duels of honor from history. Think about it this way. If you have one person and another person and they want to duel and they go to a tournament, they're going to be restricted to whatever weapons and rules that the tournament organizers have set forth, which means that if they want to do something special on their own, they can't do it and upload it to HEMA Ratings. But that's all going to change. Well, how this works is that if two people agree on a duel, what they can do is they can organize a second, basically another person to adjudicate the duel for each person. So now there's 4 people, and those 4 people are going to arrange the duel and the rules and the weapons and every other feature that they can control themselves. Meaning that I can challenge someone else to 6 passes of rapier versus longsword. I can challenge someone to an armored duel with nothing but our legs exposed. I can challenge someone to a dagger fight, a wrestling fight, anything. And what matters in the end is that as long as all 4 party members agree on what the rules are going to be, then they can have their duel. The seconds will turn into the judges and they'll determine the winner, at which point the winner and only the winner will be uploaded to HEMA Ratings under a new category for duels, and essentially you're going to gain and lose ELO exactly as it has already in HEMA Ratings based on whether or not you win. The best part is that I have video footage of a duel that happened at Clash for the Cash a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to review it now because technically speaking, I am one of the judges of this duel. See, the rules that were agreed upon by the 2 people dueling was 7 passes with 2 different weapons, sword and buckler and sidesword. And the fun part is that they didn't judge the outcome at the time. They instead gave it to a couple of people like myself who are going to review the footage live and essentially give what they think happened and be the judges for the duel. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to play the footage and break down this fight, same as I would normally, but just remember in the back of your head that the entire point of this is that unlike before where I try to avoid making basically declarative statements about what did or did not happen in an exchange, that's all I'm going to be doing. So with that, let's get started. For our first exchange of the first weapon set, which is Sidesword, what we're going to see is fencer on the left go for a couple of hand shots, neither of which land. But it's important to notice that the reason that neither fencer really seems to stop is because we don't have a director that's doing anything other than just making sure that the exchanges stop at a certain point. And it's up to me and a few other people to determine whether or not these landed. And if you look at the footage, what you can see is that both of these hand shots bounce very cleanly off of the guard of the fencer on the right. So for exchange number 1, I'm just going to say absolutely nothing happened. For the second exchange, there's another bit of a feeling out process where both fencers are unwilling to commit very heavily, and the fencer on the left takes advantage of the situation by going for some more hand shots. Whereas in the last exchange, they threw hand cuts that didn't really quite make it. This time they throw a arm stab that looks like it does make it. And if we look at the footage, we can see that the tip does depress into the right bicep of the fencer on the right and get a pretty decent amount of flux out of there, which tells me that it was a pretty valid attack. So my judgment here is that 1 point is going to be given to the fencer on the left for the stab to the arm. Now we're coming into the third exchange, but what you're going to notice here is that the fencers pretty much just separate a little bit and immediately go at each other. That's because, again, no judges have awarded any points. But what happens is that fencer on the left throws another little tiny hand cut, which is parried, but the fencer on the right tries to capitalize on this opportunity by winding down and throwing a thrust to fencer on the left's chest. This thrust does not appear to land. As you can see from the footage, the point is directed at the opponent's chest, but seems to just drag across from their lower right area to their upper left area, without really depressing or bending in any way. After that thrust misses, the fencer on the left pushes the right hand of the fencer on the right out of the way and throws a cut around to the head, which is the only valid cut that I saw during this exchange, which means that now the score is to 3 points in favor of the fencer on the left. 2 now and 1 from the previous exchange. For the next exchange, things get a little bit complicated. See, given that there's no director really telling them when to stop, or a judge telling them what lands and what doesn't land, the following exchange gets a little bit messy. Fencer on the right comes forward with a thrust that is feinted to get the fencer on the left to parry into his upper left quadrant. The second he does, the fencer on the right throws a cut instead to the lead hand of the fencer on the left, which lands pretty clean. However, after that, fencer on the left throws an afterblow to the head of the right fencer, meaning that at this point, there was a cut in the entry by the fencer on the right to the hand, and then an afterblow to the head from the fencer on the left. However, again, because no one is necessarily saying halt, what then happens is that the fencer on the right keeps his point on line and stabs fencer on the left in the head. Now, for the sake of being accurate, I'm going to judge that all 3 of these attacks were valid, meaning that in total, fencer on the right achieved 3 points, 1 for the cut to the hand and then 2 for the thrust to the face, while fencer on the left only really got 2 points for that 1 follow-up cut to the head. Now, if it were up to me, I would judge all 3 of these in a kind of deductive afterblow to simply say that fencer on the right got 1 point. But that's going to come up to the seconds and the people in the fight. The next exchange is rather fast, but what essentially happens is fencer on the left enters measure with a bit of a flourish, trying to throw their opponent off guard, and throws a cut to the hand. At the exact same time as this happens, fencer on the right throws a thrust, which, when we're looking at the footage, does not appear to land again. It comes very, very close to landing deep into the chest, but it is pushed down and away by the fencer on the left's blade, which means that it never makes solid purchase. After they begin to separate and walk away from each other, fencer on the left throws a follow-up slice and cut to the arm of the fencer on the right, which in my opinion would get him 1 point. The next exchange that we're going to look at is another very tricky one. So, coming out of the gate, fencer on the left throws 3 consecutive hand cuts, which fencer on the right does not necessarily respond to, except to parry. And looking at the footage, it doesn't seem like any of these 3 hand shots make sufficient purchase. However, if you listen to it, you can hear that on the second hand shot, there is a little bit of a noise when the tip of his sword hits the glove of the right fencer. However, when you look at this footage again slowed down, what you notice is that as the blade is traveling through the air, it doesn't lose any momentum or speed as it passes in front of the hand, which tells me that no momentum was really transferred into the glove through the tip, and that this would be a extremely tippy glancing cut at best. So, however, if you were looking to count that, that would be 1 point for the left fencer, but I don't think it was quite enough. When the fencers come back together, things get a little bit crazy. Fencer on the left throws a feinted cut and then a dominant side cut to the head of the fencer on the right. Fencer on the right does a rather similar thing, trying to close off the line in order to defend themselves and simultaneously deliver a cut to their opponent's head. In my opinion, based on looking at the footage, both of these cuts are successful. You can see very clearly where the momentum is transferred in each cut into the person's head, even though the fencer on the left technically landed their blow a little bit before fencer on the right. The idea here is that both of them were well in motion and neither of them would have been able to stop the other from actually effectively happening. So, in my opinion, this would be a double where both persons would get 2 points or effectively 0 points. For the next exchange, both fencers come forward attempting to thrust. However, fencer on the right throws a little bit of a C parry, which pushes the fencer on the left's sword into a bit of an overbind position, at which point fencer on the right stabs fencer on the left clean in the chest. However, while this is happening, fencer on the left is still attempting to land their own stab. However, if we look at the footage, I do not ever see a point at which the fencer on the left's tip ever makes a solid purchase into the jacket of the fencer on the right. However, after this is all sort of done, fencer on the left does manage to get their tip onto the leg of the fencer on the right. And this is where, if we watch the slow-mo footage very carefully, you can see there's never really a time where that tip digs into and depresses and gets bend out of the sword of fencer on the left. In my opinion, despite the fact that the tip was laid onto the leg, it would not count as a valid thrust to the leg, meaning that, in my opinion, 2 points should go to the fencer on the right in this exchange. For this final exchange in Sidesword, you might have noticed that at this point we have actually gone to 8 exchanges. This is because I deemed one of the exchanges that happened in the intermediary before to be a legitimate exchange, where the people who were judging at the time did not. This is, I don't think, a problem, as the number of exchanges I don't think is nearly as important as accurately judging the fight as it happened. So we're going to judge this last exchange same as any other. Fencer on the left comes forward and attempts a hand shot, and in my opinion, like the other ones before, doesn't quite make enough purchase into the glove of the fencer on the right. If you watch the footage, there's a little bit of a frame break between when the cut is thrown and when you hear the noise, but if there was ever a point at which the sword had lost momentum and stuck meaningfully into the glove of the fencer on the right, there would have been at least one frame of time where that sword was clearly visible up against the glove. Since there is not, my assumption is that in between frames of the camera, the sword passed cleanly well past the glove and just made a little bit of a noise as it scraped, meaning that I do not consider this glove shot or this hand shot to be legitimate. After that, the subsequent exchange happens where fencer on the right stabs fencer on the left quite cleanly in the face, while fencer on the left attempts to parry it out of the way unsuccessfully, at which point I would judge this exchange to be 2 points to the fencer on the right for the thrust to the head. So to cap things off with the score, as far as I can tell from the Sidesword portion of this duel, the score is 5 points to 5 points, with a lot of the leeway existing in that one middle exchange, where fencer on the right scored 2 2-point blows, and fencer on the left scored 1 2-point and 1 1-point, which I rounded out to simply be 1 point for fencer on the right. Now that we've moved on to sword and buckler, we're going to start by jumping immediately into the first exchange. Fencer on the right throws a committed thrust, which is parried offline by fencer on the left, at which point fencer on the left throws a very clean headshot in response. This is a pretty clean and easy to judge exchange, and I'd pretty simply just give 2 points to the fencer on the left. For the second exchange, we see fencer on the left come in immediately with a cut straight to the head on fencer on the right, which lands pretty clean. However, at the same time, fencer on the right throws a hand shot, which was clearly meant for the head of the fencer on the left, that just glances off of the elbow, meaning that, in my opinion, both cuts were valid, and fencer on the left gets 2 points, while fencer on the right gets 1, meaning that it all sort of washes out to fencer on the left simply just getting 1 point. For the third exchange, we see something rather similar to the first exchange. Fencer on the right commits to a stab, which does not quite make it. However, this time, instead of cutting to the head, fencer on the left snipes the arm as it is fully extended, and given that fencer on the right's thrust does not land, it is the only scoring action, so 1 point to the fencer on the left. In the fourth exchange, we see a similar setup that we've seen in the previous exchanges. Fencer on the right throws a deep committed thrust, which just barely misses. Fencer on the left parries the blow out of the way and comes around for a cut to the head. However, this time, which is a little bit different, fencer on the right manages to get their buckler up in time to defend their own head. However, if you watch the footage very carefully, you can see that the blow delivered by fencer on the left skips off of the middle portion of the buckler and slips down and instead hits fencer on the right in the shoulder. In my opinion, this is more than good enough for a strike, which means that fencer on the left will be getting 1 point instead of 2 if they had hit the head instead. In the next exchange, we see the exact same setup again, only this time fencer on the left has decided to thrust as well as fencer on the right. However, unlike before, the fencer on the right's thrust does not miss and instead lands pretty cleanly onto the face and the mask of the opponent. However, the thrust for the fencer on the left cannot be said to have landed at all. If we watch the footage, we can see that the tip travels towards the level of the shoulder, but then is parried away and never really makes a good contact with the jacket of fencer on the right. So in my opinion, this is a clean 2 points to fencer on the right. For the next exchange, we are back again to square one. Fencer on the right throws another committed thrust, fencer on the left parries it off to the side. However, this time something goes very wrong for fencer on the left. As you can see here, fencer on the left's cut around to the side of the head of fencer on the right misses high and ends up going completely over the head, meaning that it does not make sufficient contact. At the exact same time as this is happening, fencer on the right manages to pull their sword back and throw a short edge cut towards the face of their opponent, meaning that in this exchange, fencer on the left, despite parrying the thrust, never actually manages to hit their opponent in the head while getting hit themselves in the afterblow of what should have been their free head cut. So in my opinion, this is 2 points to the fencer on the right for the cut to the head and nothing for fencer on the left. For this next exchange, we finally see a little bit of a variation of the opening move from fencer on the right. After a couple of attempted hand shots from fencer on the left, which don't get anything, fencer on the right enters with a low cut rather than a thrust. This cut looks to go under the buckler of fencer on the left, striking them in the hand. If you watch the footage very carefully, despite the fact that you hear a lot of noise from the buckler being struck, you can clearly see it glance under the rim of the buckler and strike fencer on the left's hand. After this, fencer on the left throws an afterblow towards the head of their opponent, meaning that they would have scored about 2 points on that one. However, once again, similar to the Sidesword bout, there is another afterblow from fencer on the right. After they have struck fencer on the left in the hand under the buckler, they pull it back and throw another hand cut to the side of the extended arm of fencer on the left, meaning that both of them have struck each other, and fencer on the left has struck a deep target, while fencer on the right has struck a shallow target twice. In my opinion, this is 2 points for each person, which comes out to be a wash. For the final exchange of sword and buckler, we see fencer on the left be the one to open with a stab towards fencer on the right. However, fencer on the right does a very good job of getting into an overbind and parrying that thrust low into the side, meaning that, unlike before, fencer on the left is unable to pull their sword back up and out in order to throw a cut around to the head. At the exact same time as this is happening, the fencer on the right takes their buckler and bops the fencer on the left in the face. Now, in my opinion, this is a perfectly valid buckler punch and should be worth 2 points as it is a strike to the head, although the rules don't exactly stipulate whether or not this should be counted as such. However, in the follow-up, the fencer on the left attempts to finish their cut around to the head, only to find that the buckler that has struck them in the face is still there protecting that line, and their cut does not amount to anything, meaning, in my opinion, for this final exchange, it should be 2 points to the fencer on the right. So, to round everything out, according to my judging, Sidesword was scored 5-5, a tie, and sword and buckler was scored 6 points to 5 in favor of the fencer on the right. This was a really, really close duel, but in my opinion, the fencer on the right, Jonathan Paulino, was the winner. So, I hope you liked that breakdown. I hope you're excited by the concept of duels being brought into HEMA ratings, and I hope that if you'd like to see more of this stuff, you can like and subscribe, and maybe I'll see you next time.